All right, we're live, and I'm excited here today. I have Jason Balin, who I've got to know fairly well over the last couple of years, and he actually reached out to me maybe a week or two ago. And Jason has really been interested in kind of learning more about self-storage, and he's got some business partners and business connections that are in the self-storage business. But he thought it would be fun to kind of take over the show today and flip the script. And interview me about my self-storage journey. And for those who don't know me personally, in the last 9 months or so, I had a really successful real estate business in the Baltimore area, and just kind of became interested through some other business connections within self-storage, and just decided to, for lack of a better term, go all in. And I think there's not a lot of times in our life we could do that. So Jason is on the show today, and he's got a list of questions that I do not know the the answers to or what they are. So we're gonna.
Well, I hope you know the answers to them. You just might not know what the questions are ahead of time.
Yeah. I might not know the answers to that, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it's going to be fun. I think this is a good setup. I mean, listen, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about self-storage in general is it's probably the only asset class that we've never been involved in, right? After doing 3,000 loans through hard money bankers, I've never lent on self-storage. I've never owned self-storage. I've never been an investor in self-storage. And I think it's something that's intriguing. And I probably have been involved in almost every other deal, right? Flips, rentals, commercial properties, office, multifamily, retail, restaurants. I mean, we've lent or owned lots of that stuff, but never self-storage. And it seems like it's hot. Maybe it's always been hot, but that kind of leads me into my first question of what originally attracted you to self-storage, since, it did seem that you had a successful wholesaling, flipping, and rental company in general. So what really attracted you so much to self-storage that you were able to just not give it up, but just fully transition into the self-storage world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I haven't really talked to a lot of people locally that, know my business about it. Just people that know me, hey, reach out and be like, hey, like, what's going on? I haven't seen your emails. So to kind of cap that off, I have a mutual friend who we've had on the show, Mike Wagner, who he's a self-storage coach, and he's become a very close friend of mine. And, I went to his one-day event a couple of years ago, and we talked couple times a week, and I was kind of picking up some nuggets here and then from him. And another coach in my business group, Ken Holmes, who we've also had on the show, he was he's had 3 properties. So there were all these elements of success around me. And in my single family experience, I never really had a coach for like the first 3 quarters of my single family business life cycle. And I just kind of bulldogged my way through it and figured it out. And I just kind of had this epiphany where I was like, man, I'm gonna try to do the same thing here. I'll eventually figure it out. But I have all these elements lined up that are just little dominoes that I can knock over right now and accelerate and go all in. And that was really the real thing with the deciding to kind of pivot completely is, I feel like a lot of us, people like you and me that are serial entrepreneurs, will try a lot of different things, right? We'll try some different businesses, but we have our main racehorse, so to speak, to lean back on. So if we fail or if it doesn't go as well as we plan, so I kind of, it took a big leap of faith. I'm not religious, but just like hey, this is, if I go all in and don't have anything to lean back on, my chance of success is going to be significantly higher than if I'm like, hey, I have this really successful business where we're flipping 100 houses a year to kind of fall back on. And, not to say I wouldn't have success eventually, but just to kind of give myself the permission to just fully say, hey, let's just go for it. Let's go all in. And if everything doesn't work, we can go right back to what we were doing before.
Do you feel like you got burnt out from the old business model, just from doing it for a while, which is obviously understandable? Or was it more of you surrounded yourself with, I mean, obviously there was the shiny object thing, and there's nothing wrong with shiny objects as long as you're not a person, which I know you're not personally, that hops around the shiny object after shiny object. But was it also because you had Mike or whoever else your mentors were, that they were kind of pulling you over here and said, hey, listen, like, let us help you. This is a cool business model. And like that support did that really help take that? Because you know, it's just a little bit, I guess, of different model, plus you had a support system that was engaging. Does that sum that up?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't anybody that was quote unquote pulling me, but I felt like there were these things that were like actually like overtly pulling me in the sense like, hey man, you should really get into this. Like you should try self, you know, people are always like, hey, this is the best thing. But I saw the success other people in my immediate circle were having with it. And to answer the beginning part of your question regarding the burnout, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of, you know, I mean, I've done over 600 wholesale deals, and I love wholesaling. It's not like, hey, I'm never going to wholesale again. But for now, I've made the decision like, hey, this is like what I'm going to focus on. And I kind of had this epiphany. I was actually at Mike Wagner's house, and I was helping him fix something on his RV. And again, I'm not like a very religious or spiritual person, but there's that old metaphor where there's like the flood. And I don't know if you've heard it. And the guy gets stuck on his roof and he's like, God, please save me. And he sends the helicopter and the boat and everything, and he dies in the flood. And he's like, why didn't you save me? And he's like, well, I did. I sent the boat and the helicopter. And I felt like there were all these things kind of starting to circle in my life that said, hey, everything you need to be successful is right here. All you have to do is lean into it a little bit. I don't know if that answers you fully or.
I think so. I think that's fair. Cool. So let's get into some nitty gritty on self-storage, because I think that's what this is about, and what a lot of people want to hear and learn about is just self-storage in general. And a lot of these things are very new to me as well. You know, for you, I'm not saying as an industry, but what's your buying strategy, and what kind of to you determines if it's a good deal or not inside self-storage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of different strategies. I mean, there's guys that build new, there's guys that buy turnkey. What we focused on is buying value add properties. The property that I own completely myself, and as well as the ones that I'm invested in as just a minority equity participation partner, are all value add properties. So just like regular distressed real estate, you're looking for ones that don't have, you know, there's a lot of modernization going on in self-storage, whether it comes to just web presence, automation, just systems, where this is really like an old business model. You know, it's kind of like going from the Sears model to the Amazon model, to use just kind of a more bigger example. But so you're looking for these properties that might not be run. Like there's a lot of people that in these markets that their facility is 100% full, and that's great. That's what they want. But at the same time, their rates might be $10 or $20 below what the market rate is, because they look at, hey, if this thing's full and I don't have to mess with it, that's a win for me. But if you're really looking to come in and the thing about self-storage is it's a business with a real estate element, and you can optimize that business. You know, it's that putting in the little pieces that really pour jet fuel on it, like tinkering with the rates slowly, you know, really putting pressure on your tenants when they don't pay. Like the facility that I took over in Georgia, we took over the books and they were a disaster. There were people that had huge balances, and we've kind of come in and we don't try to be dicks about it, but we try to, hey, these are the rules. And, you know, I heard something really good about it. If you're waiving late fees and not putting pressure on your tenants, it's unfair to your customers that are paying on time all the time to allow that to happen. You know, you're letting these people pay late, giving them discounts. And so coming in and doing little tweaks like that. I've had a customer that was constantly behind, constantly going 3 months behind. And just by sending her to the brink of auction several times, she's now on auto pay, doing things like that. So just to kind of circle back, the facility, when we took it over, it was averaging probably $1,800 to $2,200 a month gross. And since we've taken it over, we haven't had a month below 3,000 since we've taken it over. And we've had several months that are at 4,000 or a little bit above that, you know, just by tinkering slowly. So we've already taken it a third higher and have a lot more ways to go, and what the previous owner wasn't able to do in owning it for 20 years.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that a lot of these are probably mom and pop operations. You know, they're not huge self-storage facilities that most of us might be used to seeing in major cities or towns. That's what it seems like. You can correct me if I'm wrong related to that. And like you said, related to late fees and things like that, it is really a disservice, because if you're not able to be profitable, the operator is not able to keep things under wrap or under control, the whole facility goes to shit and falls apart. And then that's not good for everybody. How does it, okay, we can talk about how you find some of these properties, but going back to a good deal in general, what dictates a good deal? Does that mean that, hey, for every $100,000 that you invest in a deal, you want to get a net return of $1,000 a month or a few $100s a month? I think most folks relate to cash on cash return, or how much they can make on a rental property, or how much they can make if they have a private note on a monthly basis. What to you makes sense financially as a good investment? Obviously it's a value add, right? So day one, it might be profitable, might not. But as you, I don't know how long it takes, a year to transition into leasing it back up and things like that. What's the game plan that you go for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, we're still kind of picking up and putting down different deals and playing with them. So just to take, for the one in Georgia that we looked at, it was supposedly 30% full when we took it over. And just by taking it over and putting in systems in place, we really realized it was 70% full, but just people weren't paying. So what I'm kind of getting at here is, when we look at the life cycle of a deal, we're suspected in 3 to 4 years to hopefully double the value of the property and basically make close to a 40 or 50% return between the cash flow and the equity. And I've seen several operators triple the value depending on how much value add. And so to take that back, there's a deal that I just submitted on in South Carolina that I was really hesitant on, but that facility is completely full, but it has no automation and such in it. So when we're looking at that deal without building and without adding to it, we might be able to increase the rents by 20%. And really up the revenues, but only in a year and a half. So I'm making kind of less return, dollar wise, but the ROI in the year and a half is the same as what this deal might be in 3 years. So then you want to get it up and sell it to a turnkey investor, and you could, move on to another property, or then we have the option to expand it. When we're building a property, building a building for, let's say, round numbers, just $100,000, and you might be able to go and sell, and again, another year and a half, that building for $180,000 or $160,000. So you're getting those same multiples, just in different spans of time.
So I guess it is similar to maybe a rental property where you can be in let's just say a crappy area that has very, very high cash flows, but just a pain in the neck and kind of, an area you might not want to be in, or maybe an area that doesn't appreciate, but it's got really, really high cash flows. But on the other side, you can get into a better asset class, into a better area, and the cash flow is not that great, but it's a good, solid asset that potentially will appreciate over time and be worth more. And if you look down the road in 10 years, who knows? This one's moving a lot quicker because, higher cash flow, but then this one, leaps and bounds, just jumps by it, I guess, because as the asset grows, as time goes by. So okay. So that's interesting. Now you kind of answered this question, but are these local assets? Are these nationwide assets? Can you manage a building halfway across the country? I mean, as a real estate investor and a hard money lender, I've never been a fan of investing in out-of-state assets that I can't touch, feel, clean up if I need to. But it seems to me that they can be all over the place.
Yeah, that it's definitely out of my comfort zone by a mile to buy these assets, and I'm looking primarily in the Southeast, Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas. And the reason being is, if it were an hour, maybe even 2 hours away, I would want to go tinker with that thing a lot. Kind of you probably, being in the hard money business, see a lot of these rehabbers and mom and pop landlords. They go and do things at their property and make sure. But by having it far away, it achieves two things. One, it makes me operate it like a true business from a distance, where I have to depend on the systems and so forth. And the second piece is, when I do go there, it falls into part of our lifestyle where we, me, our listeners might not know us a lot, but we like to travel. We go to the Carolinas, we go to Florida. So it kind of fulfills a piece of our lifestyle that we want to live, where we get to go do business and travel and see cool things. Like you saw in my pictures, we were at the lake this summer, and that was part of the trip down there. We went down to do a site visit and do some auctions and so forth. But at the same time, we got to do something as a family that we want to do, which was travel and see other places. So that's kind of why, touching on why I'm looking primarily to buy out of state. If there was something nearby, I would definitely jump on it. But my primary area that we're focused on is in the South.
I mean, and do you think that it's easier? Do you think that, I shouldn't say easier, do you think that it doesn't matter where it is in the country compared to like when you were wholesaling or buying rentals or stuff like that? I mean, the reason why we only invest locally is because I only invest in areas that I know and I'm comfortable with. I'm not going to lend on a piece of property in Georgia because I don't know Georgia. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what the value is of the property. The most important part, I don't know what the after repair value is. I don't know what the asset is. Yeah, potentially you can find vendors to help and resources for some of these things. But like as a real estate investor and someone who buys assets, obviously the most important job is to know what that asset's actually worth. In this case, I'm guessing it's kind of more like a multifamily property or maybe a larger commercial property where it doesn't really matter because you don't have to, the values are dictated a lot more by how many, I can get $100 per 10 by 10 unit. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. I mean, and that's interesting. And that seems to be the case because not that I know a ton of people that do self-storage, I don't. And that sphere is growing a little bit, but it seems that every single one of them doesn't have anything locally. And it's probably hard to find stuff locally. I mean, every storage place I typically see around here, maybe I'm wrong, is, a brand name, large company that owns them.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you're in a large market outside of between DC and Baltimore where you're going to have a lot more REIT style investors. We're looking in our outlier markets that might be outside of a large city by 30 minutes to an hour. The area that I'm invested in I think it's 5 mile radius, there's only like 4,500 people. If you looked in your 5 mile radius, there's probably 150.
I mean, do you analyze that data of saying, okay, well, I know 1% of 4,500 people will rent, or do you? Okay, so again, and we can talk about due diligence. That actually should have been a question that I had, but maybe we'll talk about due diligence in a second, like a checklist or something. I think that'd be helpful. Tell us a little bit about how kind of management works. Do you have full-time vendors? Do you have part-time vendors who take service calls? How do rents come in? Who pays rent? Who handles defaults? Like, are you handling all this stuff, or do you have a staff? And actually, first, how many units is that one property you're talking about? Because that could be a good frame reference to people as we go through this.
Yeah, so that property is 3 buildings. It's 104 units, which covers 13,500 square feet.
Okay.
So 3 buildings, 4,500 square feet each. We're looking at chopping some of the bigger units down. So hopefully we'll have like 108 units here shortly. But that property sits on 5 acres. So where we've been able to go, we thought we were at 30%. We were really at 65 or 70% and are now close to 90% full. We're tinkering with the rates a little bit, like creeping them up. What we're hoping we can do is add 1, 2, maybe even 3 buildings over the course of the next couple of years. And so that's kind of what we look for too, is a property with a little bit of land that we can add buildings and kind of force the value there, if that makes sense. So by having all that land, if we don't do anything with it, well, that's fine. But if we want to add parking, if we want to add buildings, we have that option to kind of force that value there, which that's one of the cool things about the business is like, when you go and buy a single family property, there's usually not a lot of forced value add you can do. Maybe you have a walkout basement and you can put a 4th bedroom or 3rd bedroom down there, or maybe add a master bath to, do things like that. But these, when you have the right property, you can really just kind of grow. You can double the size of your facility, triple the size of your facility.
Sure.
Some neat things like that to kind of make it more, kind of have multiple options. Or you can sell it and kind of leave that on the table for the next buyer.
Got it.
That example, I know you were kind of asking about the Georgia property. I don't know if that 100% answered your question, but
yeah. Well, what you talk about how the management works. Do you have full-time vendor? Do you have a full-time employee down there that's on site? Do you use part-time vendors? Do you do how do service calls? Let's say somebody gets locked out of their thing. Who comes and breaks the lock in order to get them their padlock? How do they get back in? let's say a garage breaks. I mean, how do rent payments come in? Like if you're not there on site and you're not local, who's doing all this?
Yeah, no, that's a great. Sorry, I got ahead of myself, but I missed that part of your question. So there's probably half a dozen different software providers that do things like, as far as your rent, the unit rentals, payments, and all that. We use one where when we first took over the facility, we kind of banged the phones. Like we had that rent roll and it was kind of not accurate. But anybody who had balances, we would try to do workouts with them in exchange for getting them set up on auto payments. So I think now we're up to 70% of our current renters have, like, at the first of the month, it bills right away.
And now are you doing this or is other people doing that?
That's all set up through software. So like for those 70%, like it's all set up. Like when I first took over the facility, I kind of got on the phone and did it because having somebody else do it, I knew it was just going to come back to a lot of questions. And it really only took a couple hours. And obviously down the road, that'd be great to outsource and train somebody. But it kind of gave me a feel for what goes in, what I'm dealing with the customer. I had a good profile on all my customers right off the bat. And as far as, so then we've got, let's just say a little over 2/3 of our customers paying through online. So we don't even have to think about it, right? And then when they want to rent, the company we use, they call in and will rent online through the company. So I don't have to deal with any of it. I just get an email notification. Hey, this customer is moving into unit 300 and they're paid up. So that all gets set up without me having to touch it.
So you pay for a service, like is that monthly, annualized, one-time fee? How does that work? Do they get a cut of everything?
Yeah, I think, they don't. They take like a small amount, like they charge by unit. So we pay, I think for our facility, I think we pay around $260 for the phone service a month, which isn't a bad price. And there's some things that are lacking, but for me not to have to do it, it's well worth it.
Yeah.
And then we pay, I think maybe $80, $70 a month for their software that does all the auto pays, does the website and all that stuff. So that's all kind of integrated together. And then to kind of answer the second part of your question with vendors and management, we hired somebody local. We ended up hiring our grass guy to kind of help out. He stops by, once a week, every other week, whenever, depending on what we have going on, and checks, that the lock, if there's issues with locks, so forth like that. One of the things that drew me to it, you were saying like, hey, if somebody gets locked out, is that it's a very non-urgent business. If you get a call as a single family landlord and you've got an issue with plumbing, electric, heating, like that's an issue and people are going to want it fixed. With the self-storage business, it's a lot less urgent. So the issues we have had, if they get fixed in a couple of days, it's usually not a big deal. So we hired that guy locally and that's been working out, and we've been kind of working through some tweaks with him as far as, procedures and how often things need done. And then we've been checking in with local vendors, and as far as we're putting a gate or a fence around the whole property is what we're working on now. So managing all that from 500 miles away has had its challenges, but you've kind of set the bar like, hey, I'm here. This is with email and FaceTime and everything now, it's really not as hard as it would have been even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I guess there is a lot less moving pieces than a regular house in general. Like when you get, I guess, well, let me ask you a question while we're talking about this fence thing. So like you're going to put a fence up, right? And I know you FaceTime the guy, be like, yeah, this fence looks good. I'll take this 6-foot black fence, whatever it is, wrought iron fence. Is your maintenance guy that did the lawn mowing, is he coming out to meet him there? Like, I'm just curious. Is he meeting him there? Like, do you have to get a permit? Who files for the permit? I'm trying to play like on one side you have a really labor intensive business, and on the other side it's like set it and forget it. And I know it's not set and forget it, although it does seem to be a lot easier potentially than what you're used to. With so many moving pieces, what most of us are used to, so many moving pieces. Do you think, as you grow and buy more facilities and things like that, that the setup is pretty standard? Like you don't need somebody to be on site. Like they can call into the service and they say, oh, you're unit 104. Here's the code for the front door. Your grass guy, I'm guessing your grass guy probably is the one who's cutting off the old locks and adding a new lock, right? Yep. So he's like your property manager, AK or whatever, your self-storage manager, whatever you call
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like daunting to manage, like you were saying, for managing that from far away, but it's really not. And it's about just, if we have to go down here for a week and bundle everything together with some site visits, that again is part of why we want to buy in certain areas, so that we can go visit our family that lives in those areas, so we can, do trips. Like when I owned properties in Baltimore, like I wasn't usually excited to go do a site visit at those properties. There was no like part of me that was like excited, except maybe stopping at the Chipotle along the way. But this is like a different. So, and again, in the 9 months we've had it, it's just really setting the expectations with your vendors is like, hey, this is what we need. This is what we do and how we need it done. Can you do that? And I know, like with contractors, it's like sometimes that's a big ask, right? Like, do it like this, and it comes out completely.
Yeah.
But you're dealing with fences, you're dealing with gravel, you're dealing with metal buildings. So all in all, it's not that hard. And I think letting go of some of that that's kind of why I wanted to get into the business. Like, you know me a little bit better than our listeners may, but like I want to go and touch things and be involved and make sure everything's running right. So having to give up some of that control and that oversight has been pretty awesome. And I think it's something that a lot of investors in our space struggle with doing. So it's kind of forced that hand for me, if that makes sense.
Do you think you could do a deal by itself without ever going to the property once?
Today, no, but I think eventually, yes. And I actually kind of take that back a little bit. Like if you had the right person, like I've looked at several properties remotely and had just gone online and gotten people to take pictures, be like, hey, can you do a drive-by? And, look at these things. Here's a checklist. I think you could. And, it's a lot of it is going to be the jurisdiction. I think living and working in Baltimore, we deal with a lot of bureaucratic red tape where it's hard to get people on the phone, hard to get answers. I send the guy in a lot of these small towns we're looking at an email, and he calls me the next day. He's like, hey, here's my cell phone. Call me if you have any questions. So it's easy to kind of get the answers you need to from like a zoning perspective, development usage, what am I allowed to do here in the future, which are really like the key things that you're looking at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm trying to figure out how hands off it could be. But you're right. I mean, it's a concrete 100 square foot, unit with a garage door and a lockbox or a padlock. So there's a lot less moving pieces in it. And I've had storage facilities before, we have one right now with our office. So like, I don't have a ton of experience with, being a customer of one, but a lot of my stuff relates to the ones we have. And I mean, they're around here, right? So there's typically people on site as well. But again, I guess at the right numbers, it does make sense, right? To have somebody on site. I mean, you're paying $260 a month plus $70 for this, plus the guy cutting the grass. So whatever. I'm not saying you're paying $500-600 a month, like $6,000 a year. That's not a ton of money, but like, I guess with scale, there could be a time that it makes sense to, have an employee.
Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on knowing your market. Like if you're in a market, like you're a little bit outside DC, if you're dealing with like a class A facility with the right type of customer, they want to be handled a little bit. But in these outlier markets, like I think within 10 miles of us, there's 8 facilities and one has a full-time manager, and it's like an 80,000 square foot facility.
Do the people that most people, I guess, you're trying to do automatic payments for people. Do people write checks, and where do they mail them? They mail them to your house, or do they mail somewhere else?
Yeah, we still have a handful of people that mail checks that are like leftover customers. And with all the new people, and I'm kind of going back and forth on this, we make them set up on auto pay. And in the market we're in, it's a small market, right? So there's a lot of people that don't even have like credit cards and debit cards, which may sound like outlandish, but that's just the type of market it's in. Yep. So I've been going back and forth with waiving that, because we still have some old customers that refused auto pay, but they'll go in every month and pay online. But then we have some that are like, hey, I don't have debit or credit. But at the same time, what having these facilities has shown me is that if those customers get like a couple payments behind, the likelihood of them getting caught up is low. So it's like, I'm torn because I might be doing a disservice to them by having to like, hey, get in this unit, their lack of organization now that instead of owing $100 for that 10 by 10, now they have $300 or $400 and they're just like, screw it. So they're kind of puts them in a bad spot. So we have, they are mailing them to our PO box, but we're trying to phase those people out because those people have found that as soon as they get behind, it's like an uphill battle for them.
And do most people, they do books in-house? Like you do your books, or like do you have services for that? Like it seems like there's a lot of automation already in place, right? Like it seems like there's third-party vendors and companies that are already doing this. A lot of the management on this. Did they do the books for you as well, or you guys just handle that because it's not all that labor intensive?
The service we use, they do have a bookkeeping service, but we are putting that in with our normal bookkeeper, so that everything at the end of the year, all of our tax prep and planning it's really easy for them to just say, hey, this is here, these things, rather than having more vendors we need to deal with, just consolidate it. Because really it's just like all of the other businesses that we've done with real estate. It's, rent in and construction, either capital improvements or repair improvements. It's really simple overall, other than having a lot of rent transactions because you have 100 customers. So
yeah, I mean, I've heard that a default happens quickly, right? It's not like you're kicking a tenant or an owner foreclosing or evicting on an owner. It's very, very different than these. What is it, like 30 days and they're out type of thing, and you can just change the locks? I'm guessing, I was going to ask the question related to, you do put judgments for past rent, but I guess it's not worth, they owe you $100. It's not worth a filing charge more than that. So I guess you don't really go to collect on them. Maybe you do. Do you try to collect them?
We haven't. I'm sure some bigger REIT style companies may push a little bit depending.
But you can auction off their, like, their stuff belongs to you though, right? Like, how does that work?
We just had an auction in today, and again, we when we were down there in August, we went down to we were going to Florida already, but we ran the auction while we were there, and the units, like, they're not getting a lot of money, but so we've turned that into more of an automated process too. We do all that online. There's like 3 or 4 different auction website companies, so we run all that remotely now too, which then again further automates that process. We just had an auction today that ended for a customer that they weren't on auto pay, they got behind, it was catching them up. So it's like weeding those people out so that then we can have the customers and show them, hey, this is how it's run, this is the process, and it's just better for everyone.
And those auctions can happen. I mean, is it like Storage Wars? You ever see the show Storage Wars?
I haven't seen anything good. It's all like,
sometimes there's old baseball cards, or there's memorabilias, or vintage watches, or you haven't found anything cool. Like it's all peed on mattresses and nasty stuff. Because a lot of those Storage Wars, they bid up for a few $100 to a few thousands. And I know it's TV, but again, this is why we're having this podcast, because I don't know much about storage.
The unit we had today it was one bid and sold for $10. So
is that the starting bid?
Yes, that was the starting bid. And when we went down there,
wait, but what does the auction company take from that?
10%.
So they got $1 to come out there.
It's all online.
Oh, it's all. Wait.
It's like Hubzu.
Wait. So, but how is that? But how's that set up? Can't they go look to see what's in there, or is it just blind?
No, we just put pictures.
So okay, so the way that it happens in Storage Wars, and I haven't seen.
Yeah, they do it all in person.
Yeah, they all head out, and they're full-time guys that are buying stuff at auctions, and they go around and they open up the garage. They put a piece of tape or chalk so you can't walk into you can't go in there, touch and feel anything. And they have a few minutes, and then they're like, "Cool, let's start the bidding." So it's not like that.
I mean, I've watched that show, and I've been on a live show. But so I watched that show, let's just say a dozen times back years ago. And when in the show they were talking about, like, oh, I'm going to go to this one because that's in a high dollar area.
That's right.
So the area we're dealing in, it's not like a lot of, let's just say, high dollar stuff, at least in the units that we've auctioned. So by going through that first auction on site, we had 2 people come out to the auction for them. We were like, all right, this is a lot of effort. And the same thing happened. We had 8 units, 4 of them sold for $10, all the same guy, and the other ones didn't. And we ended up having to clean them out. So by moving into the online process, we've now, maybe we get a little bit more money, but it takes less manpower to do the auction, and it automates it more. We don't have to collect money. We don't have to mail checks.
Yeah.
Auction.
And you're only a few $100 worst case scenario past due anyway. So it's like, whatever, let's just get this thing operating again. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about financing. Do people buy these things in cash? Do they get bank loans? Do they get private loans? How are some of these things, in your opinion, in your experience, financed?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different structures, and in this business, since you're kind of dealing with more business owners, I've seen a lot more owner finance deals or partial owner finance deals, and I'd say that's a good chunk of the properties, not the majority. And then there's also a lot of bank financing, and there's been more operators that have come in that are willing to lend on this. Live Oak is one of the big ones, definitely probably the biggest by far, at least that I know of, that they kind of specialize in this space. I've known some other operators that have been dealing with local banks that just kind of know the market, and they're like, hey, you're getting this. This is the NOI. Like, this is a great deal. Like, we'll lend on it. So, and then there's a lot of people that are doing cash, just, on deals. And with the deal we just offered on in the Carolinas, so we kind of offered, at first, I just threw out like $500,000, and the guy was like, no. So we went back to him and then structured 3 different deals. We're like, well, the $500,000 was the cash offer. We can come up to, let's just say 580 on that. And then if we're going to do bank financing, we can come up to like, I think it was like 625. If we can do owner financing, we'll do 700. That seems like a big spread, which it is, but we were factoring in, all the costs with the bank financing, like the appraisals, the environmentals, all that stuff. If we can eliminate those and do the owner financing, then we can build out another building or 2 and refi it and pull all that money back out versus having to go through 2 bank loans down the road if we get that property potentially. So there's a lot of different options in the space. And I've also seen a lot of investors pool money. That's the other 2 properties that we're invested on. We have equity and cash flow participation. We're just a partial investor on that deal. So they raise the money and we put the money in, and then we get a piece of that money. And then usually they're coming in with none of their own money, so they don't have debt. So they're giving up equity, but they don't have debt or payments. So in a value add facility that could be negative cash flow for 1 or 2 years, that's actually, could work out favorably for them if they don't want to keep on the funds to pay that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about these deals and partnerships and creative structures. I know some business models in general work great if you're the owner operator, but as soon as you remove yourself and take on partners, it doesn't work as well. I'm guessing there's probably enough room in these deals that you could be the operator or the sponsor who puts the deal together, and you can raise capital and maybe even hire somebody hands-on that's going to run it. It seems like there's probably enough room in these deals, obviously if you buy them at the right numbers, to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what you're really, it's just like any other facet of real estate. You make all your money when you buy it, and then there might be some icing on the cake at the end with whether, in single family it's going to be appreciation or so forth. But here it's like, hey, can I get the rents up higher than maybe I thought I could? Can I get the occupancy up a little higher and all that stuff? Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of room in the deals, especially the larger ones. Once you start getting into the 20, 30,000 square feet, which in the reality of things aren't even that large. Those are really the more medium-sized properties. Where do you find
these ththings typically? I mean, are they bidding? It doesn't seem like there's bidding wars for these things. I mean, maybe they are, but how do you find a self-storage place in Georgia when you live in Maryland?
So the one I bought, I found through a wholesaler that had it, that I just happened to be the right place, right time, and found it, and was kind of interested in that market. And just like speed, being able to analyze and kind of have a little bit of that gut feeling of, hey, this is a good deal. But there's a lot of commercial real estate sites which these get listed on. We're looking to farm our own deals too, just like we did with single family. So we're looking at direct mail, cold calling, reaching out and networking with brokers, and just kind of, sowing the ground a little bit to see what sprouts out of it. A lot of people get discouraged. Like, I made all these calls and did all this, but this is a much slower business than other facets of real estate. So just creating those relationships to have the opportunities come your way I think is important. I mean, it's whether you're in other areas of commercial or single family, it's the same thing. But with this being a little slower, I think it's easy to be like, man, this isn't working out. But it's really just creating all those relationships, contacts, building that rapport. You know, whether it be with the brokers, whether it be with the wholesalers, whether it be with the owners that you reach out directly that aren't ready to sell. Like I have 3 owners that I know of that they're not ready to sell today, but I would bet money that within the next 5 years, they're going to sell that property just because of their age or other situations that we may have discussed.
Yeah. So, is there any ways to kind of scrape data to see how long someone's owned it for? I mean, I guess it's not public information of how many units are rented, because I was thinking about it. Like, let's say you have a big facility and it's completely abandoned or like only a few units. It's, you know, a building like that, just warehouse, it's worth nothing for the most part. I mean, depending on where it is, if it's good land in a good part of the country, it is. But in some of these areas that you're talking about, it's probably worth nothing, or it could be worth $500,000 overnight if it was fully rented.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not, yeah. So, I mean, that's not the case everywhere. So another one I was just thinking about was like an Easy Storage, which obviously is a name brand. And I remember there was one across from us when we had an office in one of our other offices in Columbia on Red Branch. And I remember they used to have a standard 1 unit or 1 floor brick building, right? And I don't know if they had to get approval to do this, but I think that thing went up like 4 or 5 stories high because they knew there was demand. They probably already had a clientele. They're all climate controlled. And I'm guessing they're probably making a fortune on it, right? It was all, you know, they already own the land, they already own the building, and they just kept going higher and higher and higher. Like, have you noticed if there's as many restrictions in this business compared to, you know, I mean, you know what it takes if you own a single family house and you want to turn it into a 4-unit building or a 4-unit apartment. Like, that typically can't happen. I mean, in some areas it can, depending on how it's zoned, but like that's a harder process in general. In this, is it easier to do stuff like that? Like if like on your place, let's say you wanted to build, you had enough demand that you could go 10 stories up. Like, could you do that?
Well, that's the thing about in the smaller markets, it's a lot looser for what you need. Like, we don't need a permit for our fence. We don't need permits for a lot of the stuff we're doing. But in these more denser markets, like what that you're talking about outside of DC, there's a lot of municipalities that are cracking down because self-storage is kind of like this in-between business. Is it like commercial or is it industrial? Yeah. And so I've seen, I can't name the market specifically, but I've read and heard things about municipalities changing the zone. Like, okay, we're going to move this from business zoning to industrial zoning. So the issue with that is when you're self-storage, it's a convenience business, right? You've got stuff, you want to get it out. You're probably not driving by 3 or 4 to get to the 5th one. So you want to be near population centers. So when you see these ones that are popping up 4 stories, you know, the thing they're doing that probably get around some of that is the outside of that building looks more like an office building than a warehouse or in these markets. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's a lot more regulations coming down on denser markets because they don't want to look at what's essentially a warehouse building next to single family townhomes.
And how did you learn, or how do you do the research to know, like, hey, is there room for one right here? Or like, should I expand? Like, oh, I know there's one a few blocks away, but should I build one right here? Like, how do you do, like, is that something that you're just learning? Because you're new at it, right? So you don't obviously know the full answers to that, but like, you know, for instance, if you buy a rental property, if you buy a regular piece of real estate in a subdivision, you know that depending on your improvements and other things, approximately what it's going to be worth. Like, how do you even know? It's not necessarily like, oh, if I build it, they will come type of situation. Maybe it is, but how do you know that, especially in some of these rural areas? Like, and I remember when we were driving to Florida over the summer, I remember I passed a self-storage facility and it was completely just sitting there vacant. And I was like, yeah, this, you know, seems like it's a decent area. Like, you know, if you just build one, will people come and rent?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So when we're doing basically what you're getting into is due diligence and analysis. We are going in and pulling the population data by concentric circles and how many people live in this radius, how many people live in this radius. So in the storage business, usually your core is your 3-mile radius, because that's like again, I'm kind of getting into, you know, I got into a convenience business. And what you're doing is you're looking at the density, and strategically in storage, you can support 7 to 8 people per square mile. But in some of these markets in the South, you can maybe support 9, 10, 11, 12. I know some people that have purchased stuff in the 15 to 16 square feet per person. So I'm looking at this market and I'm saying, okay, there's me and there's one other guy. What's the total existing square footage and how many people are there? What can that support? And when you look at it, you also have to look at the type of inventory that's there. So I'm looking at these competitors. I'm like, they don't have any web presence, or maybe a poor web presence. Maybe their rates are low. Maybe the facility just looks terrible. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to go there because you're like, well, this place looks like somewhere I'm going to get robbed. So you're kind of looking at that and looking at what it can support.
Yeah. So tell me that part again about, let's say, 10 people per square mile. Is that what you said?
Yeah. The national average is between 7 and 8. So in the South, 7. So, okay. So I'm sorry. So for every person, you should have about 7 to 8 square feet per person. That's the national average. But in the South, you have some different demographics because so if you've got 10,000 people, you should be able to have 70 to 80,000 square feet.
Square feet. And what does square feet dictate to related to units?
Because I'm looking at the demand, right? So the units you're going to have a mix. Like if you might be in a lower income area, people might trend smaller units. If you're in a higher income area, people have bigger 3 and 4 bedroom houses, you're going to probably get bigger units. So your unit mix is going to depend on the demographics of your market. Got it. And earlier, we're looking at taking some of our bigger units and breaking those down, our 10 by 30s, and breaking them into 2 15s or a 20 and a 10. Yeah, if you've got 10,000 people in a 3 to 5 mile range, you're probably going to have demand for 70 to 80,000 square feet. In the South, you've got different demographics because houses down there don't have basements. You've got a lot of mobile homes. You've got some different demographics that tend to push the demand higher. So when I went to look at mine in Georgia, I was like, all right, there's this one over here that's 10,000. I'm 13,500. So you've got about, let's just call it 24,000. And then the demand shows that I should have 32. There should be demand for 32,000 square feet. But why is this underserved? Is it poorly run? Is the management bad? So I went and looked at that and I was like, all right, that has to be why this is run poorly. So therefore, if I can come in and put the right management in place, I can get it up. And to that point, I have some tables and stuff that I've been looking at in the last 9 or 8 months, however many months it's been. We've been able to increase occupancy by over 3,000 square feet just by doing some simple things. Like this will make you laugh, but I haven't changed the signage out front. It still has the old name with the old sign out front. I haven't done anything cosmetically to the property because we're kind of getting ready to do a big overhaul. So nothing has changed about the property other than we've come in and put the right management and systems in place. We've actually raised the rents as well, which might seem counterintuitive because you're like, well, if you didn't do anything to the property, what's going to make you raise rents? But it's just answering the phone, having the ability for people to rent online, things like that.
No, that makes sense. But and let me ask you this: so like this guy that you want to buy this property from for $500,000 cash, right? So my guess is it's probably underperforming. You think you could probably make it better in general. What stops you, or as a business model, does it make sense to just buy land, do a new construction facility nearby, knowing that after it's up and running, you have a brand new facility, and chances are there's a lot more demand anyways there, and you could potentially take his tenants from him in the near future. Like, do people do that instead of buying existing buildings?
Yeah, I mean, so the one that I'm looking at, so that could be a play, but you're basically starting out at zero, and then you're in like a Walmart style price war, right? Where it's kind of like a little bit of a race to the bottom. So you're probably dropping your prices, so you're the cheapest guy in town, and you have the nicest facility. So yeah, you're going to fill up. But there's this ramp up period where you've got a bigger capital expenditure. It's going to be harder to get that. With the existing facility, I can come in and potentially get that owner financed. I've already got cash flow stream in place to support it, the debt, whether that be owner financed or whatever. And I now, with the existing cash flow, I can tinker and pull rates. Like that's the great thing about it. It's a business. I'm like, okay, well, you're undercharging by 40. These rates should be 55 or higher. I can go in and immediately raise rates on all the units by you don't want to usually jump them up 100%, but raise them by 5%, by 10%, by 20%.
I get it. No, that makes sense. I got 2 more questions for you. Then we can go and finish your show that I hijacked today. What's been the toughest part for you so far of owning storage?
Of owning it?
Yeah. Or the business of self-storage?
I don't know about actual tough part, but I would say, kind of circling back about the remote management, just letting go of that piece and just kind of trusting the process, whether it be the vendors or the boots on the ground or whatever it may be, just being at a distance from being able to go out if something needs fix, like not fix like necessarily a door's broken, but if like there's an issue, if there's trash, like I don't know what's going on down there. I just have to trust the process. So that's been tough from more of like a mindset standpoint to kind of lean into that. But that's also one of the big reasons that I alluded to in the beginning of why I wanted to get into this business, is to kind of pull me out of some of the day-to-day operations that I was in with my other businesses.
Gotcha. And what do you think Terry Royce's end goal is with all of this? Like, what's your end goal with just storage? Not everything, just self-storage.
Yeah, I mean, storage to me is just like a more fun. It's a more fun rental business. You get a single-family rental, and you throw a tenant in there, and you're kind of set for the next year, 2 years, whatever your lease is. There's not a lot you can do there, right? It's not, to me, like, that's people like us. We like the elements of business, like the funnel stuff you guys create. That's fun to tinker with that stuff and figure out what works. The storage business to me is the same thing. Like, okay, well, if we raise rates a little bit, can we do this? If we break these units down and rearrange them, can we do X? Like, okay, we can build on our property and not be limited just by what we've already bought, but now we can expand and accelerate the appreciation. So you can play with the business a lot more from just like an operations standpoint, and that to me is fun, like going in and tinkering with the business.
Yeah, but that's fun on a small scale until you have to do that. And I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at. I mean, I believe that one of your reasons for pivoting is because you went from, hey, I'm having a lot of fun in wholesaling or flipping or whatever, and now I got myself stuck in a position where like I'm not having fun anymore, right? Because I got a lot of stuff. I mean, listen, anyone can go buy a few properties and do it, but we all know that as you grow, your main day-to-day operation isn't like going to find and flip a house and putting all the finishing touches on it. Like, you don't even know what houses you own anymore. You don't even know what properties you have anymore. You don't even know who your buyers or your sellers are anymore. You're dealing with management and like C-level position stuff. And it's very, very different. And I believe that most people got into investing not necessarily for that. And again, I'm not stating that it's a bad thing, but like, if you get stuck in the transactional stuff every day, you potentially put yourself in a bad position. And that could happen with self-storage, right? Like, I understand you're tinkering and stuff, but like, let's say you had 50 times the amount of units you had now. Like, my guess is you don't want that either, right? Like, no. There's gotta be, it always goes back to, and I see this all the time because I see a lot of real estate investors, and the real estate investors that make the most money are the ones who only do a few deals a year, not the ones that are doing 100 deals a year, because their margins are super slim. They always need that next one. The ones that are doing a few deals a year, anywhere between 4 and 10, 12 deals a year, are really profitable because they're making $40,000 a clip instead of $10,000 a clip. So I'm guessing your mindset is similar to that. And I love what you're doing now, trying to be, pinching out every darn penny on each one of these things and get it as, efficient as possible before you move on to your next one.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't elaborate on that enough. So it's like fun, but you also have the ability where you don't have to do that. Like, if you're like, okay, well, this one is good, you can kind of step away from that. And that's kind of one of the things that's awesome about the storage business is it's very forgiving, and you can kind of just let it run itself. Like, yeah, maybe it's not as efficient as it is. And going back to the other businesses, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that just had to be touched. A lot of, hey, we got to do this. We got all these people. We got, people. We had our VAs overseas. We've got a big team locally. So that is a lot of management. Where now I don't have that element, so it's a lot less pressure. So I don't know. I feel like there was another question you were kind of leading into that you said I didn't answer.
No.
So.
No. I will say I'm a little disappointed that you don't have any self-storage playbook t-shirts though. And because of that, you didn't even wear the HMB one. This is if anybody does not know, this is the limited edition Terry Royce shirt. He wanted orange. We ordered 5 of them. How many did I ship you? 4, and this is the last one remaining.
I need a fresh one. Mine's faded. I've worn it so much.
I don't know. I'll see if I can, see if we can get our vendor to hook.
My ClickFunnels shirt.
To hook them up. I had to get an orange one. It was your special edition one, and I still have it with me, and I don't wear it. I guess I could probably ship you this one since I don't need it. Did you go down 1 notch in sizes now?
I'm working on it. I'm in the middle of the 75 hard challenge. So
well, this is a large. So you let me know when you're ready for it.
Okay. Did I answer your question though? I felt like you were kind of asking like what the goal. And the goal for me is to get, I would say, between 3 to 5 properties, and that's more from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah.
And then kind of maybe sell one every year, one every other year, and buy a new one and kind of turn it over. Or maybe I get to the point where I'm like, hey, these 3 to 5 are good, and I just kind of let those coast. And that's the thing I think in this kind of where I'm headed is, we all like to go, but having the ability to coast or take your foot off the gas and or put it back down when you want to is, I think, what we all really want. But I think a lot of people get stuck in the business and don't know how to take the foot off the gas.
Yeah,
so,
I understand.
Being a slow business kind of forces you to do that to an extent.
Yeah, well, this is also a new business for you, so it's forcing you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you were like, oh, cool, I want to start wholesaling again, it's like, well, I'm going to go race again because that's what I know. Like, you can't really go fast because you don't know how to go fast. It's not like people are picking up the phone and calling you, hey, I got a property, or hey, there's an auction with 100 houses I can go pick and choose from. Like, you're not dependent on doing it. But listen, I like the self-storage. I'm hoping to learn more. I'd like to be able to lend on these assets in the future. I recently looked at our first one that our buddy Ian Horowitz sent over, and it was out of state. And, I don't do much stuff out of state, unfortunately, but, I'd like to consider some of these things and potentially be an investor, lender, owner of some of these things. It's an interesting business model. I related to a lot of the stuff that you were saying. I mean, I don't love owning rental properties. They're too hands-on for me. I'm not good at them in general. Like, I'm a better lender. I'm a better more passive. So, but I think that the resources that you need for these is a little bit easier, on these things. So, yeah,
for sure. I don't think it's I don't want to say it's easy, but there's not as complicated as it seems once you kind of get in it.
Yeah. So. I can see that. And I mean, listen, a lot of people I know these days own self-storage. So
yeah,
that's helpful. When you have a sphere of people that are investing in like kind or similar assets, it makes it easier because you have people to kind of help with stuff. So cool.
Yeah, man. Does that, did I answer some of your questions? I felt like some of them you were kind of kept bringing them back. Like I wasn't getting to the core of what you were looking for.
No, they were good. They were fine. No, they were good. I didn't sabotage you. You thought I was going to come on here and, ask you some crazy questions.
Hey, you never know with Jason Balin. So, well, Jason,
have I ever called you out before?
There's nothing to call me out about.
Okay. Hey, I mean, if there's someone else that's been commenting a lot on this podcast may have done so, but
did you get some good questions too? Like, is there anything else? Any last questions before we wrap up that you might have, or might think anybody else has?
No, I think that's helpful, not just for me, but probably everybody that was listening. And, I think if anyone was listening and someone's interested about self-storage, share this with other people that are interested. I think you gave a lot of nuggets, and I think you were the right person to do this because, although you have experience, you don't have a ton of experience yet, and you're still learning every day.
Yeah. So Jason, just, I appreciate you kind of coming over and taking over the show and flipping the script. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, or, what platforms do you have, or what's a great way to get in touch with you or your networks?
We have a lot of platforms, anything related to hard money bankers, but our website's hardmoneybankers.com. You can email me, Jason at hardmoneybankers.com or 240-994-2284. But you should be able to find us online. Happy to help.
Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show today again and taking over, and we'll have to do this again down the road. And I appreciate everyone who tuned in.
Anytime. Thank you, Terry.